Who can tell me what this big old body of water is?
The Mediterranean.
It's a Mediterranean Sea, right. Mediterranean Sea is, in fact, it's given away right up here. The biblical world of prophecy in the book of Revelation, right? Now, last week we talked about Revelation chapter 17, Babylon the Great. And Revelation chapter 18 is Babylon the Great also, right? Revelation chapter 17 is about the religious part, or the way, maybe the way God sees Babylon the Great. Chapter 18 is the way man sees Babylon the Great. And it's more of an economic thing. It's an empire of wealth. But between 17 and 18... we're going to fill in some gaps so we can show you some things that we definitely have not covered before. The whole focus of the book of Revelation actually, or pretty much is focused right around this area, the Mediterranean Sea. Remember those beasts in Daniel? We said they rise up from the sea. And here's Jerusalem. And so you can see Jerusalem is the number one focus, right? The main focus of prophecy. And this area right here, if you remember, that's where the 7 churches are. Or 7 churches were. Remember the book, when we started out, John was told to write this book and to send it to the 7 churches. He picked those 7 churches, I believe, for a reason. This whole area also was the Roman Empire, right? When Jesus came. Jesus was there when the Roman Empire existed. You had the 7 churches here. You had Jesus crucified in Jerusalem, rose from the dead in Jerusalem. So this portion of the earth is so important. And to jog your memory, remember, like just through mentioning the 4 beasts, Daniel talked about a lion with wings, a bear with 3 ribs in his mouth, a 4-headed leopard that had 4 wings. And then this final beast that Daniel talked about, 10 horns. This one here, we know that in the time of Jesus, or right before Jesus, this beast rose up. This beast represented the Roman Empire. And that's why I positioned him right into Mediterranean Sea, because this whole area was the Roman Empire. This helps you, I hope, or the purpose here to go through this like this is to try to pull together what you've already learned, what we've already talked about, so we can lay some other things out which we haven't covered, which are really pretty important to understanding Revelation chapter 18 and beyond. And obviously, when you begin in the book of Revelation, and it's been so long since we've been in the 7 churches, but of course it started out, remember the whole main emphasis in chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3 was these 7 churches, which we just mentioned. You can see that there was a road, this is actually a road that connected all of these 7 churches together. And what I think is interesting is the way these were connected, the way these actually were geographically is the way God addressed them. Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. And of course, then the circle came back. These were actual cities. We visited that. We're not going to talk about all those details again. We've done that. We put that to bed. But just to remind you or to rehearse that within your mind. And here you can see it maybe a little more clearly. The thing that stands out here, here's Jerusalem. There's those 7 churches that we talked about. And here's the island Patmos. This is where John was banished. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense. If you think about it, here he was, and the closest thing to him was those 7 churches. So he said, send them to the 7 churches. Now, obviously, the book of Revelation, like all the books in the Bible, were meant for all the church, right? But notice all 7 of those are where? Or what we would call today Turkey. Now, it wasn't called Turkey way back then. It's called Turkey today. Sometimes when you're going through the Bible and you realize that some of the nations that are mentioned by old names, like Cush. Well, there's no nation called Cush, right, today. So you have to kind of do a little research to find out, well, what is he talking about? Now, obviously, if it says Jerusalem, it's always been Jerusalem, right? So you don't have to find out. Years ago, we never had the technology that we have today. We have phones. We have satellites. We can zero in through GPA anywhere in the world. And, we have that technology. But the cool thing is, through Google Maps, we find out that, the Bible talks about the king of the north in the last days. Here's Jerusalem. And in most of our maps, if you just take a regular map, which we're very familiar with, if you went straight up from Jerusalem, you would go into through Syria. And then if you kept going, it would go right into Moscow. And many people, because of that, have said, oh, look, if you draw a straight line, it goes right up into Moscow. Therefore, Russia is the one who's going to invade Jerusalem, because he comes from the north. But if you go with Google Maps and you strictly line up this line with the North Pole, you see it goes right into Turkey. It bypasses everything else. It just goes out to Ankara, and that's in Turkey. Here's Istanbul. You can't kind of make it out because of the circle up here. But Istanbul, that's the same as Constantinople, right? We've talked about that before. Istanbul is the capital of Turkey. So if you want to know the exact north of Jerusalem, that line goes right into Ankara, Turkey. You may or may not be familiar with Ezekiel 38. It talks about the battle of Gog and Magog, and everybody's written for many years about what that is. Well, really, the nations that are identified there are these four. And it actually talks about Ethiopia. But Ethiopia is actually down here a little. And remember I mentioned Cush. It actually literally, it doesn't say Ethiopia. In English, when they translated it, they said Ethiopia because there is no nation called Cush. But now it's pretty evident that what was intended was Cush, was Sudan, and not Ethiopia. So in English, there's kind of an error there, but the original language hasn't changed at all. It still says Cush. But anyway, you have these four primary nations here. Turkey, Libya, Sudan, and Iran are all mentioned in this war that comes against Jerusalem. And you see, here's Israel. You don't see Jerusalem up here, but you see Israel right up there. And right above by Jordan and Ammon and Lebanon and right around there. You can see these four major countries or nations, and it looks like they got Israel completely surrounded. This idea, having this understanding, being able to visualize this helps you to understand what's coming. And when I say it's coming soon. Okay, when we read these things now, we're no longer talking about, sometime in the distant future, 50 years from now, 100 years from now. This is very likely coming soon. And you can see Israel right there, bam, right smack in the middle of it all, right? This is what I mentioned before. Turkey was very famous biblically, from a biblical standpoint, because as we mentioned long ago when we were studying, you had the Roman Empire in the time of Jesus, and of course that was pagan Rome, and then there was a lot of persecution of the church. But then finally there was this Emperor Constantine who actually claimed that he was a Christian and said that Christianity didn't really make it the primary religion of Rome, but he led the way for that to happen. He claimed to be a Christian himself, and he renamed the capital there to Constantinople. He called it after his own name. But that's very important in church history, all the way down through church history, because Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine Empire. Remember when the Roman Empire split off, there was a Rome on the west side and Byzantine Empire on the right. On the east side and the west side. And it's also very important, we talked about when we got into the seven churches, remember in Pergamum, which was also in Turkey, there was, what do we see there? What's that picture? Anybody remember?
The altar of Zeus.
The altar of Zeus, or it's also in the Bible, it's called the seat of Satan. In fact, it's called seat of Satan twice. Right there in the same few verses, God calls it. Basically, when I see God say something twice like that in the midst of, just within a couple verses, what he's saying is,
Pay attention.
don't miss this.
That's right.
It's like when he says, verily, verily. He never throws one verily out there. He throws two. And I think it's kind of like when a guy goes like this. Did you ever see the quote? And in fact, I find that kind of annoying myself when somebody goes, I used to have a supervisor that did that. And I quote, But I think when God says verily, verily, when Jesus said verily, verily, he's trying to, it's almost like today we wouldn't say verily, verily, we would take a highlighter.
Yeah.
A yellow highlighter, right? How many highlight in your Bible? That's okay, if you find that helpful. It's not like you're going to get in trouble for highlighting in your Bible. Anything that helps you can write notes in the margin of anything that helps you to learn the Scripture is not sinful. Don't listen to people that, say, oh, you're marking up the Bible. You can do that. It's your Bible. And when it gets all marked up, and if you want to get a new one, you can get a new one too. Some people think, oh, I can't get a new one. And the other one's all torn up. If you're going to use that Bible, it's going to get all worn out. You can get a new one. Here's what happens. We have so many notes and stuff inside our Bible. We get the new one. We really don't want the new one because the old one has all our stuff in it, right?
Right.
But here's Pergamum. Maybe I shouldn't have made it blue. I wanted it to stand out. But as I look up right now, it looks like water. All right, but it's not water. It's land. Okay. So, in fact, the water is right here. I should have made the water blue, and that, So, but the blue portion is land, and that's Turkey. Now, here I've got 10 reasons why Turkey is key in understanding last day prophecy. And anyone that's watching what's going on with ISIS over there, and Iraq, and Syria, and Turkey, and so on, knows that something is up. Well, 10 reasons Turkey is key. Number one, all 7 churches are in Turkey. And we have scriptural references there on the side, Revelation chapter 2 and 3. Number 2, and we just pointed this out, the seat of Satan is in Turkey, Revelation 2:13. Did you know there's nowhere else in the Bible that's the seat of Satan except in that chapter, and it says it twice, like I said. So God is definitely targeting Turkey and calling it the place where Satan's throne is. Number 3, the true north of Israel is Turkey. And that's relevant when we look at Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 6, 15, chapter 39, verse 2. I don't know if you know this, but Noah's Ark actually landed on Mount Ararat in Turkey. And you can see that in Genesis 8, verse 4. Well, I think that's significant. Daniel chapter 8 and chapter 11 focus on the Greek Empire, not the Roman Empire. And at its fall, ancient Greece was divided into Greece, Turkey, Syria, and Egypt. Remember, we went over that. And so it is significant from the prophet Daniel. The Eastern Roman Empire was headquartered in Byzantine, which was what we showed with Constantinople. That was their capital was in Turkey there. So the Eastern Roman Empire was headquartered in Byzantine. It outlasted the Western Roman Empire by 243 years. The Ottoman Empire, everybody remember we went through Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire was the greatest Muslim empire ever. The Ottoman, and by the way, its capital, they changed Constantinople to Istanbul, and that was the Ottoman Empire. And we've shown how it was the greatest empire, and it was headquartered in Constantinople, which they changed it to Istanbul, was the longest lasting empire for 6 centuries, from 1299 to 1923. In fact, they had possession of Israel all that time in Jerusalem. And they actually gave it back because of the World War, at the end of World War I. The Euphrates River originates in Turkey and will dry up. When we went through Revelation chapter 16, verse 12, we read that in the last days, the Euphrates River, which runs from the Persian Gulf all the way up, right through Iraq, right through where Babylon used to be, all the way up into Turkey. And they actually have a dam. If anyone can dry up the Euphrates River, Turkey can. And the Bible says literally the Euphrates River will be dried up. It could be supernatural, or it could be what just Turkey does it. And it says that in Revelation 16, it allows that the kings of the east to come to cross over that water. Also, if you pay attention, you'll find out that all of the conflicts with ISIS, they're taking all these areas all the way up the Euphrates River. Now, it kind of makes sense because it's a source of water. Okay, so it kind of makes sense, but it's interesting how it goes all the way up the river, the Euphrates there. And if you'll recall, when we were in Revelation chapter 9, there was the 4 angels who were bound at the river Euphrates. Remember, it's significant. It was out of that area where the locusts come forth. We also brought up at that time that the chapter, Revelation chapter 9, verse 11, was very significant about the beast, the end times, the beast rising up out of the bottomless pit. And what was interesting there is the word 9/11 has become very significant to all of us, right? When you say 9/11, everybody in the United States knows what that is. So then all the I say quote Stan, Central Asian nations are Turkic nations. We're going to point this out later, but because you probably don't know what I'm talking about, or some of you may not, some of you do, but they generalize them as Turkestan, but it consists of several nations that used to be part of the Soviet Union. We'll look at them. But all of those are actually Turkic nation. So when you say Turkey, it's not just Turkey. But if Turkey becomes this large empire again, this large caliphate, all of those Stan nations will be included. Muslims still look to Turkey as a global leader. This is as the global leader of Islam. Why is that? Because they were the greatest caliphate or the greatest Muslim empire ever. And there is desire for a caliphate. Muslims have always had the desire to return back to world power, world prestige. They want this caliphate. All of them want the caliphate, and which means that they would be leaders, and they would be in control of pretty much of the earth. Under this same 10 reasons for why Turkey is key. Turkey was home to the 4th and the last caliphate. It was abolished in 1924. We saw that already. Caliphate is an Islamic state ruled by a caliph, which is an emperor, under Sharia law. How many heard of Sharia law? Sharia law is some bad stuff. Here's something that's, just to give you an idea why Sharia law might be a bad thing. Sharia law actually says that if you're a female living in the land and it's during wartime, and any of the armies pass through, they're allowed to rape you. In fact, your part as a good Muslim is to let them do it under Sharia law. You have no claims against them. That's absolutely disgusting. Can you? It's like wild animals, savages, and yet this is what they embrace, and they can say, no, Sharia law is right. Sharia law is good. It's just. This is terrible. The kinds of things that they embrace in the name of God. The caliph, the emperor, if you will, the Muslim emperor, was the one mentioned here, Caliphate Rasul Allah. He was a successor to the messenger of Allah. And so that's how the caliph is always considered to be like, you can trace him back to Allah, and trace him back to Muhammad. Kind of like with Catholicism, you can supposed to be able to trace the popes back in succession, which obviously is not true. But so you have here this guy. You got three people here. This last guy here, or this first guy, Abdul Mesid II, he was the last caliph of the Ottoman dynasty. In other words, at the end of World War I, he was the one who was in charge of the caliphate, okay? And he was very much Muslim. And a believer in the caliphate. He was the leader, obviously, of the empire. Then, the one who, after World War I, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk became the father of secular Turkey. He was in charge of the national Turkey, and he decided that Islam was not the way to go. Islam was bad for the people. It was putting them behind, the evolutionary chain or whatever. It was not. They couldn't keep up with the Western world and technology and advancements. So he sided with the West. That's how Turkey became an ally of ours. And Turkey actually has been, up until recently, they surprisingly, even though they had all the Muslims, they've been pretty well secular. And except for now, we have this guy here. This is the 12th president, Recep Erdogan. He's been the president since about 2014. And he wants to push it all in the other direction. He wants a caliphate. He wants Islam to rise up. He wants a new Ottoman Empire. And he keeps swaying the people back in that direction. Of course, this terrifies Israel, because Israel has actually had really good relationship with Turkey for many, many years, since its inception. They have not been the enemy. This is why when you read when you are reading the prophecy of the last days, and it enters into, for some reason it says it entered into Gog's mind, Gog being Turkey, and it's not Russia, it's Turkey. And it enters in their mind to attack Israel. And everybody seems surprised when you read the chapter 38 and 39. Why would they all of a sudden they just attack Israel? Well, you can see, we didn't know until we get here, but now that we're here and we can look at what's going on, this guy wants to push to a caliphate. He wants to be a pro-Muslim and nothing else. He believes that Muslims have the right to rule. And so you have a big stirring going on there in our world today. But the thing that's scary is they're still a part of NATO. They're an active member of NATO. And of course, I'm confident that whoever the president of the United States is, he shares a lot of secrets with NATO. And so Turkey's right in those meetings, right? They're right in there. And Turkey's a very, very powerful. Turkey has had nuclear weapons there. And I believe that nuclear weapons that they had were ours, but I don't know if they have any of theirs. How many remember Daniel's image? You should remember that. If you haven't seen it here, you've seen it somewhere else, but very important in Bible prophecy. We're not going to go over the whole thing. Just quickly, just to tell you, though, when Nebuchadnezzar saw this image, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, he saw from the head, which represented Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, all the way down to the feet, was the nations that would come until the end. When you got to the feet and the toes, the Messiah was going to come at the end. So this image he saw was represented all of the primary kingdoms of prophecy. What's interesting here is that those kingdoms on the right-hand side here, we see that there was Babylon, the Medo-Persian, Greece, and Rome. Rome was the nation that was in control in the days of Jesus. And according to the original prophecy here, Rome will still be in control at the second coming of Christ. They call it the revived Roman Empire. It's gone through many different shades of changing and transformation, but it's still there. In fact, you know how much it's there, because every time you turn around, who's in the news? The Pope is in the news, right? The Pope is a player of Rome. And the empire, the Roman Empire was Rome. And we see the significance. Well, there's going to be an empire return in that same land, which is why we started with the Mediterranean Sea and all the land around it, because that's where Rome, where the Roman Empire was. Well, this fourth beast that Daniel spoke of, I know we've covered it a few times. We're going to look at it just to read the scripture. We're going to say a couple things that we've brought up before, but we're going to see some new insight looking at this as well. Because how many of you are concerned about what's happening in our day? We could go back, we could say, what happened in the time of Jesus and what happened in the time of Charlemagne and so on and so forth. But really, mostly when people are interested in prophecy, mostly what they're interested in is what's going to happen now, right? So let's read this in Daniel chapter 7, verse 8. It's an awful, terrifying looking beast actually, but I wouldn't want to come across it. But you can see he's got 10 horns, and there's an 11th horn that's coming out of his head there with a face on it. But I'm jumping ahead. So let's read the scripture. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. In fact, that little horn seems like it's grown almost as big as the other ones. Before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. Now remember, when we covered this before, we said originally when this little horn comes up of this beast that represented the Roman Empire, Rome had been divided into 10 nations, 10 horns, if you will, 10 kingdoms, and 3 of them had to be completely rooted up to allow for the revived Holy Roman Empire to rise up. Okay? And which, when I say Holy Roman Empire, who rises up with him is the papacy. Okay, they go together. And so 3 of the first horns would be plucked up by the roots, and behold, in this horn were the eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. Now remember, this beast, the reason we go back to this beast all that, because this beast stays from the time it rises up, it stays here until Jesus comes. Only it goes through transformations. In fact, here's where we talk about Jesus coming, Messiah. I beheld till the thrones were cast down. This is Daniel 7, 9 through 10. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands of thousands ministered unto him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were open. And so you can see that's God there. The judgment's being set. Well, we know the judgment doesn't happen until the end, right? In fact, in the book of Revelation, we see it like this. And then there was a great white throne, and everyone who died was even raised up. Everyone has to go before the great white throne in judgment, including the devil, including the fallen angels, including the demons. And I beheld, Daniel 7, 11 through 12, I beheld them because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. We see that in Revelation. Remember, at the time when Jesus comes back, he's going to take the beast and the false prophet and cast them in to the lake of fire. And then he's going to take Satan and throw him in to the prison, the bottomless pit, for 1,000 years. He's going to let him out, and then when he comes back again, he's going to take him and throw him in the lake of fire. So that's all we're reading here, that the beast was slain, his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. And remember, the beast represents that final kingdom. As concerning the rest of the beasts, what rest of the beasts? We saw the lion, the bear, the leopard, right? We just got through seeing that. As concerning the rest of those beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. This is interesting because it's talking about throwing this last final beast into the fire, and there alongside him is still the lion and the bear and the leopard. In other words, they're all still there. Even though it represented a succession of empires, they're all still there even in our time. Daniel 7, 19 through 20, then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and the nails of brass, which devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with his feet. Sounds pretty rough, doesn't he? It's pretty tough, pretty rough. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before them 3 fell. We already saw that in the other verse. Even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. And you can see that horn there with the face on it. the mouth. And Daniel 7:21 through 22, I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. And sometimes we wonder, how come things happen to good people? Good people. When I say good people, I'm talking about not only good people, but good Christian people. Why do bad things sometimes happen? And we're going to be asking, it seems like we're going to be asking our question more and more and more. Why do things happen? And it says right here that the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. There's certain things in God's plan and that He allows. And He allows, at the end, He's going to allow this horn, who, when we speak of the horn, we're generally talking about the end, the final Antichrist kingdom, right? The Antichrist kingdom is more than one person, by the way. And this is where a lot of confusion has come, because we're always trying to make one Antichrist. Did you know the one who wrote the book of Revelation, John the Apostle, who we always taught when we go to the book of Revelation, how many times have you heard me, as we're going through the book of Revelation, say the Antichrist, the Antichrist, the Antichrist, the Antichrist? But you know what? The Apostle John never mentioned the Antichrist throughout the whole book of Revelation. He never said the Antichrist. Now, he did in the other writings, and what he said was, you've heard that Antichrist has come, and he talks about there being many Antichrists. There's not just one. But he painted the whole picture. And I think the reason he didn't say the Antichrist is because he didn't want you to have myopia, looking at things through like a narrow field. He wanted you to be able to see the whole broad picture like we've been trying to cover here. But anyway, the horn always, the little horn that comes up always represents the Antichrist kingdom in one form or another. And here it represents from the Roman side. So anyway, I beheld that same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them for how long? All the way till the end. Look, until the Ancient of Days came. That means until, and we're not talking about Jesus' first coming, we're talking about His second coming. In other words, this will continue. The saints will be, the horn will prevail, the Antichrist kingdom and spirit will prevail against the saints until the Ancient of Days came. Judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. And I'm looking forward to that, because that is ultimate victory. Daniel 7:23-24, we read, thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, shall devour the whole earth, shall tread it down and break it in pieces. Well, it has 2,000 years it's doing this. And that's exactly, if you look at history, that's exactly what it's done. The 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first. He shall subdue 3 kings. Now, when it was all the way back in the time of the Roman Empire, when it first rose up to allow, this is after the time of Christ, we've all heard of the fall of the Roman Empire. It happened in 476 AD. There were 3 horns that were rooted up to allow for the Holy Roman Empire to rise up. In other words, a revived Roman Empire, only this time it had that nature about it, that it had this holiness about it. Anyway, the 3 were the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths. I know that doesn't mean anything to you because they're not around anymore. And so unless you study history, you have no idea what they were. But here you can see them on the map. I've got the ones that fell here. You have the Vandals, the Heruli, the Ostrogoths here. They're circled, and there's a, what do you call that? It's not a square, but because it's not perpendicular, but I forget what you call that. But anyway, yeah, go back to your geometry days or whatever. So you can see those 3. Those are the ones that are uprooted. In fact, if you can make out, this is a horn, and you can see the roots. And that's a horn over there. You can see the roots, and there's a horn over there. These are the ones that were pulled out of here to make room for that's what it looks like little scribble, but if you examine them real close, they're actually the horns that were ripped out, and it shows where they're coming from. Anyway, what we get from this, we can answer this question, what facts does the Bible say will distinguish the Antichrist kingdom? Well, during the fall of the Roman Empire, we had this. The little horn rises among 10 horns or nations, of which 3 of them are plucked up by the roots. And this horn cannot rise until after 476 AD. Why? Because that's when it did. Because there wasn't 10 horns. Rome didn't divide up into 10 horns and break. The fall of the empire happened right around that time. And so the Holy Roman Empire can't rise while the Roman Empire is still in command, right? So it had to die for it to revive and come back again. It's kind of like when the beast says the beast was and he was not and he is. We can see there's a death and then a resurrection. A death and then a resurrection following. Well, it's the same thing here. For Rome to revive or transform into its, like a chameleon. Now here are the horns, of course, like I said, the Heruli, the Vandals, the Ostrogoths, they're now extinct. They don't tie to anything. But these other ones, the Alemanni became the Germans, the Burgundians became the Swiss, the Franks became the French, the Lombards became the Italians, the Saxons became the English, the Suevi became the Portuguese, and the Visigoths became the Spanish. Okay, so that kind of ties things together. All those countries that we just mentioned are Europe.
Yeah.
Right? So remember, that's why I put that beast in the Mediterranean Sea there. Because the beast is still there. The nations are still, those 7 horns are still there. They're not extinct, they just changed their name. But they're still there. So we already read it. So for the horn to come up, it has to pluck up 3 horns by the roots. We saw that. The little horn is a man speaking great things. We've seen that in the scriptures we read. But last week we talked about, and we've talked about it before, this harlot who rides on the 7-headed beast. And we remember that the heads represents kingdoms, right? I think it's more than coincidental. See, she cannot ride on the beast until the 10 have become 7. After the 3 horns are knocked down, now you see that there's 10. There were 10 kingdoms. Now there's 7, and all of a sudden, who's riding on the beast? The harlot. You see, she snuck in there. When the horn rose, she snuck in there too. And it's like they have this joint kingdom. It's called the Holy Roman Empire. And Daniel 7:26 through 27, and he shall speak great words against the Most High. And she shall wear out the saints of the Most High. We're talking about that horn again, that Antichrist kingdom. He shall think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until times in the dividing of times. Remember we said that coincides with 1,260 days and 3.5 years and 42 months that are all talked about in the book of Revelation. And it's also rehearsed in the book of Daniel. It's 3.5 years, 42 months, and 1,260 days. That's the time of the final Antichrist rule. However, remember we also talked about in prophecy, sometimes a day can be a year. And so we not only have the 1,260 days, we actually had, if you look at it, we had 1,260 years why the harlot was strong and in power and ruled over the kings of the earth. You go back to European history and you can see exactly what we're talking about. They had individual kingdoms, but the Pope ruled over them all. Those 3.5 years, they coincide they tie in with the book of Revelation because, remember, Antichrist will reign on earth in his kingdom for 7 years, but for 3.5 years, he may not even know himself that he's the Antichrist. It's not until he dies and comes back possessed by this, inhabited by this beast that rises out of the bottomless pit, which is, we call him Apollo. He's Apollyon. He's named in the scripture. And we've seen that come up so many times, and you look back through mythology, and the worship of gods, and Apollo was very significant. I believe it's the same personage. But anyway, so he becomes the Antichrist. The scripture clearly says he has 42 months that he will reign. That also coincides with the time. Remember, in Revelation 12, we said that Satan has war in heaven, and he is cast out of heaven with all of his angels with him. For 42 months. He has a short time. He has 42 months to rule. And he will rule through the Antichrist. But let's go back to 7:26, Daniel 7:26 and verse 27 here. It says, "But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him." I'm not quite sure everything that encompasses, but remember, those of us who are destined for heaven, we go up in the rapture, we're going to be in heaven, right? And then there's some Israelites that are going to be in heaven. But beyond that, there's going to be people that are allowed to enter into the millennial kingdom, which is going to be on earth for 1,000 years. So he's talking about that kingdom. And also, after that, what happens? Well, the kingdom continues on. It's just that the New Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, actually comes down upon the earth. And the whole topography of the planet seems to change. And we'll get into that. I don't want to get into some of that stuff now because we're not there with the millennium. Just to show that this is talking about the end of the end of the end, all the way, not even past the Antichrist. Even past that, even past the millennium. Because after the millennium, remember, Satan is loose from his prison. He comes back, and all kinds of stuff happens. But you'll see we're actually getting pretty close, because I don't know what we're going to do when we finish here. Pastor will be relieved. So Rome is destroyed. We had the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 AD. We had the uprooting of those three horns. And then we did have the arrival of the horn come up. It was called the Holy Roman Empire. It happened in 800 AD. It was Charlemagne. He's known by Charles the Great. He was first the king of the Franks, Charles the First. And if you've ever heard of Charles the Great or Charlemagne, he was the one who satisfied this rising up of the revived Roman Empire, which was the Holy Roman Empire. So from 800 AD, he became the first Holy Roman Emperor, the first recognized emperor in Western Europe since the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the pagan Roman Empire. Now we have here a map which represents the European Union. So it's not just Europe, but the European Union. The European Union is kind of like the United States of America. It's got 50 states, right? Well, the European Union has all these countries that are part of it. Now, you can see here the United Kingdom up here, right? United Kingdom used to be a part of it, but just very recently, they got themselves detached. Right? The Brexit, they called it. The exit of the British. They voted democratically. They voted to get out of this. Because the whole rest of this wants the New World Order.
That was just recently.
But they recently... Now, I see that as a really interesting sign. And anyway, it perks my ears up because... all the way through the scripture, seems like Britain is tied to the United States of America. We saw when Israel, remember when the wings were broken off of the lion that represented Britain, we said that those wings were given to Israel, to help Israel. And those wings represented the United States of America. And the thing about it is, something helps, something comes to Israel's assistance in the very last days. And so the question is, of course, does God use the United States of America to help Israel escape from the Antichrist? That's a question we ask. We don't have the answer. Probably not until we get there, but it's a valid question. And I see hope. I see hope here that Britain has detached themselves from here, because what that suggests is maybe, just maybe. Now, most of your politicians, most of your presidents have wanted to be a part of this new world order. It just may be that the United States of America wakes up, just like Britain did, and says, no, we don't want this. The people stand up and say, no, we don't want this. So that's my hope, is that that'll happen. I don't know if it'll happen or not, but I do remember that many of you probably heard of George Washington. Obviously you heard of George Washington. But he had a dream or a vision, if you will, that spoke about the end times. And it wasn't biblical, but it was a terrible vision that he had, and it looked like the United States of America was completely destroyed. Then all of a sudden, she stood back up, and she was strong. And maybe in the very beginning, the first president of the United States, God gave him a picture of the end time, which said that it will look like the United States of America will completely fall, but she'll rise back up. Maybe this country will have retained some independence. In fact, it's similar to, remember when we talked about the League of Nations? The League of Nations was a predecessor of the United Nations. It was the United States of America's idea. In fact, the President of the United States of America, it was his idea to form this predecessor of the United Nations. And then the people, they didn't want it. They didn't want to be a part of it. I wish we never became a part of the United Nations. I think we ought to kick them off into the water. Kick them right off into the ocean. We pay almost all the money to support them. But anyway, I just bring this up. This is what, when we talk about Europe, we talk about that beast. This is why I threw them in the Mediterranean Sea here. You see, it's still here. It's just called by a different name. This should not seem strange. When Rome took over, the Roman kingdom took over the Grecian kingdom and they became Rome, they didn't even have their own gods. They took all the Greek gods and they renamed them to Roman names. And so it was the same system. So why should it be strange that we have the same beast here? It's not called Rome anymore, it's called Europe. Why is that strange? Actually, they named it after Europa, which is mythological. It was that the woman that was escaping at the putting her arms around the bull. But so anyway, so I see. You see that the beast is still represented by this. It's almost like this beast doesn't really appear to be a beast. It's almost like he's in hibernation. But he's still there. Is what I want you to know. When a bear goes into hibernation, you don't see him. You don't see him. He goes to sleep. You don't see him for a long time, and then he comes out of the hibernation, right? So I think that's a good illustration. The beast is there, but you don't see him. He's in hibernation. But what I want to show you was, you see up here, and you can't make it out so much, but there's members of the European Union. And then there's candidate members. And there's a couple candidate members here. One is Turkey. And I think one was, I think this was it. Because I can't really tell the color here. Serbia, maybe. And then up here, Iceland. And there's probably some other ones also. But they're not really members. They're candidates. They've requested to become members. Well, here's the thing. Turkey has long wanted to become a part of the European Union. And the Europeans want, or the politicians in Europe, they want Turkey to become part of it. The reason is because the Europeans are ahead of us in the destruction of their own country. And when I say that, they don't have any babies. And we did the same thing in the United States of America. But they're much worse than we are. There's so many people that they're not on welfare, but they're retired. They have nobody to pay for the Social Security. They have nobody to pay for all these expenses because they didn't have babies to reproduce. We've done the same thing. And we've got, you have the threats all the time that, they're going to have to do away with Social Security because there's no people, right? So Europe is saying if we could bring Turkey into the European Union, Turkey's unemployment is like 25 or greater percent. They're looking at we'd have all these Muslims come in to Europe to work. Because once they get into Europe, Europe is borderless. Basically, you can go in Europe, you can travel all over the place. You are a member of Europe, you can go all over. And if you're a member of Europe, you can come to this country and visit. So Turkey can't do that right now. But if Turkey became European Union, then they would be, they have all this freedom. People would come and they would work in Europe. What we haven't talked about, mentioned, those Turkestan countries. Turkey's in a relationship with them. They're all made up of Turks. So if Turkey becomes part of the European Union, then all them would also, through Turkey, would have access to Europe. And that would make about 300 million Muslims coming into Europe. What would happen?
As the Mexicans here.
Yeah, what would happen to Europe? There's only 300 million people in Europe. And a big portion, 10% of them or something or whatever, is already Muslim. What would happen when all that? Europe would become completely Muslim, right? So will that happen? I can't tell you it would happen, but here's what I think. I don't think Turkey is going to become part of the European Union, but I think what's going to happen is there's also the EFTA. They become acceptable trade partners. They're in this trade pact. And that way they can still get the people working in there, but they're not really members of the European Union. And I think that's going to happen, and that's what's going to form this Antichrist kingdom that we're going to see. And it makes sense because then you're going to have all these younger people able to support the system and to support all these people who are on welfare. And I believe that's why our politicians want to do the same thing with borderless with the Mexicans. They want the Mexicans to come in because the Mexicans will then support many of the people that are on retirement and Social Security and everything. So there is some sort of strategy by, and then Trump wants to build the wall. Hillary said, no, that's not to build the wall because they don't want the wall built because they want these people to come in. So there's always two perspectives. There's two ways of looking at things. But the U.S., we brought it on ourselves by not having babies. When I grew up, my parents had 4 children. 4 children was pretty average, actually. There were people that had a dozen or more. Now today, Muslims do have 15 children. And we are lucky if we have 1. 2 people get married and they have 1 child. Well, what would happen to the human race if it was up to those 2? What if it was Adam and Eve and they had 1 kid?
Oh, jeez. Where would we be?
There's no women. It would have 1 male child, no women. What's it going to do?
You wouldn't have anybody to incest with.
You wouldn't have anybody to fight with, that's for sure.
Solve the other problem.
Huh?
Solve all the other problems.
All right. Now we say all this. I want to bring you back to. We've seen this once before. We're going to come back here because this is I think of vital importance as well. Understanding the future. Zechariah chapter 5 through 6. We see this. What's represented in this picture. Let's read the scripture here. Then the angel that talked with me. This is from Zechariah. The angel that talked with me went forth and said unto me, Lift up now thine eyes and see what is this that goeth forth. And I said, what is it? So he looks at it, but he doesn't understand what it represents. And he said, so the angel said, and he said, this is an ephah that goeth forth. He said, moreover, this is their resemblance through all the earth. The ephah is like a basket That, it's like a wheat basket or something. You would carry a bushel basket. And he says, so this is an ephah, and this is their resemblance. Now he's going to tell you more about the ephah, and you can see it here. He's going to tell you more about this picture. And behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead. You can see, basically it was a lid, right? It was a lid that was on the basket. He lifted up a talent of lead, and this is a woman that sits in the midst of the ephah. So she was hiding. It's like if you had a pot. Sometimes my wife is cooking something on the stove. And there's a pot and there's a cover. And I come home, something smells good. I can walk over there. Smells good. I don't know what's in that pot. Could be a dead skunk. I don't know. It smells good. So what's the natural thing? You take the top off and you look and see what's in there, right? And then I get yelled at. Right? You're not supposed to do that. But anyway, that's what's happening here. There's this, Zechariah sees this, and the angel lifts the lid off so he can see what's inside the basket. And then the angel says, this, inside the basket, this is wickedness. Now, he's not saying that all women are at wickedness. He's saying this one inside the basket, she is wickedness. I believe 100%. I'm 100% sure on this. This is the same woman that we see riding on that 700 beast. This is Babylon the Great. This is that same harlot. This is wickedness, and he cast it into the midst of the ephah, and he cast the weight of lead upon the mouth thereof. In other words, he put the lid right back on the basket. He only lifted it up so we would know what was inside it. But then he put it back up. And this is pretty interesting, because take the illustration like the church today. God has revealed, down through history, God has revealed many things, much insight to the understanding of the Spirit, much insight to prophecy and the understanding of His Word by the Spirit of God. But the lid was taken off, all this stuff, and now the lid was put back on. And so many people have forgotten. Generations weren't even there to see it. They don't know. There's so many people who have left Christianity. They don't even know what Christianity is about. And we can't even tell them in the public school. We can tell them what Muslims are about. We can tell them what witches are about. We can tell them what Buddhists are about. But we can't tell them what Christians are about, because it's politically incorrect. Just recently they were talking about Halloween coming, and I'm completely flabbergasted that they're making such a big deal on what kind of costume you would wear. Some costumes are considered to be politically incorrect, and they will not tolerate it at college campuses. Like, for instance, if you come dressed as Tonto, remember the Lone Ranger and Tonto? If you come dressed as Tonto, you're not supposed to be an Indian. That's politically incorrect. Probably if you came as Hitler, that would be, incorrect as well. Politically incorrect, because masses of people they'd kill. But, what? A pregnant nun. You could come as pregnant nun. Yeah, that's okay. But see, that's okay because it's Christianity. You can do that because it's Christianity. But if you come as Muhammad, that would be politically incorrect. You know who says if it's politically correct or not? The one who says, "Oh, I'm offended." If you come dressed as a transgendered, or a male dresses up as a woman, they would say that's politically incorrect. You're not one of these transgender. You're making fun of transgender people, right? But you can do anything again. You can come as anything to deride Christianity. Anyway, so the lid was taken off. We see what it's all about. Then the lid was put back on, and it speaks loud, I think, volumes to the world we live in. But that's really a side point. Zechariah chapter 5, 9 through 10. Then I lifted up my eyes. I looked, and behold, there came out two women. You can see two women, one on one side and one on the other here. So two women come, and the wind was in their wings. They had wings like the wings of a stork. That's important because a stork is considered an unclean bird. Okay, so it's unclean. What it represents is some unclean messengers are carrying this basket. Where are they taking this basket? He says, so they had two wings of a stork. They lifted up the ephod between the earth and the heaven. And then said the angel that talked with me, whether do these bear the ephod? And so the question is being asked, where are they going to take this woman? And he said unto me, to build it a house in the land of Shinar. It shall be established and set there upon her own base. Now, Shinar is Babylon. It's like a secret word for Babylon. He could have just said he's going to take her to Babylon. We know that the harlot rides on the seven-headed beast. We've already addressed that last week about being representing the Vatican, and primarily not only the founder of all false religion, but also we equate her with the apparitions of Mary. And this says we're going to take this woman who I believe represents Babylon, who represents this harlot, who represents all false religion, who represents the Vatican, and they're going to move her to Shinar, which is Babylon, and put her on her own base to be worshipped properly. In other words, for some reason, the worship of Mary and these apparitions are going to move from Vatican as a central place over to Iraq. And I'll tell you how it's going to happen. It's going to happen. There's going to be a massive apparition that the whole world is basically going to believe. The supernatural event. And she may even, in the apparition, she may even command she wants to be there at the center of the earth back in Iraq. Babylon. You know why? That's where she came from. Remember when we talked about where did all the false religions start from? Remember there was Nimrod and Semiramis and Tammuz. They built Babylon. They built the Tower of Babel. They were all in Babel. That's where it all started. There's going to be this major apparition that all these nations, all these people are going to accept. And she's going to be moved. Her central place of worship is going to be in Iraq and in Babylon. Why? Think about this. You have Europe, who's always worked. Europe has always worked with the Vatican. During World War II, Hitler was one of the Pope's favorite children. I mean, they worked hand in hand. The Pope supported Hitler. He supported Mussolini, who was a fascist, in Italy. The reason the Pope is becoming actively involved, they need a false prophet, someone who's going to tie together all the religion, and it's going to start with Christianity and Islam. What are you going to have? And just when all this occurs in Europe, you're going to have millions of Muslims coming in, right? Working in Europe. You need to heal the wound between Christianity and Islam, and the one who can do it is the Pope in his friendly apparition, who's going to say, and they've already taught that Muslims are just as much saved as Christians, even though they deny that Jesus is the Son of God. The Quran comes straight out and says God has no son. But they worship Mary. And if you go back and you look at the apparitions of Mary, the famous apparitions of Mary, there have been a lot of Muslims associated with that event as well. They worship Mary. They'll worship Mary as the virgin who conceived Jesus. They believe that. They teach that. They just don't believe Jesus was the Son of God. But they'll worship her. She's going to be moved to Babylon because Babylon doesn't exist yet. When this happens, and it's going to happen very soon, when it happens, Babylon is going to all of a sudden, like overnight, just rise up. Great wealth. There's going to be people, because of the apparition, people are going to come from all over to see the apparition. They're going to bring all their money. All this money is going to start pouring into Iraq. Something else is going to happen. I'm jumping ahead here, but remember we talked about changes coming to the United Nations. I believe the United Nations is also going to move from New York over to Babylon. All this is going to go together. It's going to happen at the same time. When the Bible talks about Babylon, it doesn't talk about a great nation. In Revelation, it talks about a great city. It's not, great nations are Russia, Europe, United States of America, right? These are great country, great nations. Canada is even, you could even call. But when it talks about Babylon of the last days, it talks about a city. It's not a nation. It's not a nation. It's a city. A city which has such wealth, is going to have more wealth generated in it than any other city in the world. Right now, the United States holds control over the economics of the world. The U.S. dollar is still the strongest currency. Of course, there's no gold backing it, and the nations have caught on. We just keep, running the press and just making money. It's almost like monopoly money. There's coming a time when there's coming to an end, and nations have already, for the last couple of years, they've been objecting to the United States having that position. They want it transferred over to one independent source. That independent source will be all economics are going to go through the United Nations. That's going to be the new world order. Then everybody is going to benefit from it in common, not just the United States. So it's a good plan as far as the rest of the world is concerned. So that's going to be located there. All economics is going to pass through there. We've already given up the internet. Now that we've given up the internet, it's going to come under the control of the United Nations. And now when you you buy things off the internet, they're going to put fees, and it's going to go directly to the United Nations. And all this money is going to flow into this Babylon. Saddam Hussein, he rebuilt Babylon, all the old stuff. All the stuff from Nebuchadnezzar's time. He wanted to rebuild Babylon. That's what's going to happen. The worship of this apparition is going to draw people. All this finance is going to come in. That's how it's almost going to become a city overnight, a great city overnight. How many have heard about this apparition from Warraq, Egypt? 2009, and then I think it actually started in 1968. It's been repeating itself, actually, in Egypt. At the first time that it came, there were like 200,000 people saw it at the same time. And ever since then, there's been reappearances in this area of what they believe is Mary. Now, she doesn't talk. She just sits there. And be's an apparition, a goddess of some sort. Now, whether she's going to finally appear when she does and she's going to claim to be Mary, but she's probably going to extend that. She's probably going to say, Jesus was my son, Muhammad was my son, Buddha was my son. She's going to extend it. I am Mary to those who worship me as Mary. I am, and she'll start naming up some goddesses, and there she will be. The resurgence, you can see all over the world, the resurgence of paganism throughout the world, especially in Europe, but throughout the world. When that happens in Babylon, all these temples are going to be re-erected. Pagan worship is going to be re-erected. There's going to end up being one religion. And all money is going to come, all religious money is going to come, it's going to be taxed into that location. All economics will be taxed in that location. The city is just going to burst overnight. What am I telling you? if we see it in our days, the best investment you can make is to bet on the devil. Ooh, that sounds antichrist there. Bet on the devil. But no, we know from the Word of God that this city of Babylon is just going to flourish overnight. I don't know how you bet on it or invest in it, because unfortunately I don't have the money to do so. But people who have witnessed these apparitions, they really believe in it, right? And this is all it's going to take for the world to unite together. And then anyone who doesn't follow after that is going to be, persecuted for not joining up with them. And when this happens, the Pope is going to move from the Vatican. The Pope's, when this apparition comes and the United Nations gets, the Pope isn't going to stay in Vatican City. He's going to move where the wealth is. He's going to move where his star apparition is. Because remember, he's getting promoted. Right now, he's the pastor of the greatest Christian religion, right? Or what people say, the largest Christian religion in the world. And some would say he's actually the pastor of all Christians. It's just a lot of Christians don't accept him. But he's going to be elevated to pastor or religious leader of all religion throughout the world. All religion is going to have to answer to the Pope. He's going to resign his position. In fact, this current Pope's already talked about he's not going to be a Pope forever. He's going to resign. He's going to retire. He's already said that. Why? Because he's going to take that next position. Anyway, what we have here's the map. Remember Pergamum, by the way, what was there? The seat of Satan, right? It's attached to Iraq. And here we got the apparition. This is where it's going to happen. Down here, underneath here, is the Persian Gulf. So that's where this whole great city is going to rise. I believe it's going to be a literal city of wealth, unbelievable wealth. You can't even imagine the wealth that's going to come through that city. The Hebrew word ephah means a particular measure for grain, being the standard measure for grain and similar articles, since it was classified with balances and weights in the injunctions regarding just dealing in trade. It is therefore, by definition, it is the measure of commerce. And the Babylon of Revelation 18, that's all you see. You have the religious nature in Revelation 17, and you have this great commerce, this great city. Remember when it's destroyed, all the kings and the merchants, they all cry and wail because who's going to buy all my stuff? That's why I said, if you see it happen, bet on Babylon, because it's going to happen. You can see a balance down here, which is symbols representing, supposed to represent all commerce. All commerce. Remember, we talk about no one could buy or sell unless they had the mark. The mark's going to be tied to the whole international computer system. And whoever's in control of that is going to get a little bit, it's almost like even if it's a 5% tax. Just think, every transaction in the world, and you're paying 5% to the United Nations. Just think how wealthy that place is going to become overnight. Here's a prophecy that, how many ever heard of Mene, Tekel, Upharsin? Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. This is also from the book of Daniel, so it has to be significant, having to do with prophecy. Does anybody think that that's probably true? I mean, we've seen so many things that are important in the book of Daniel, right? So we're going to look at this. Daniel chapter 5, verses 1 through 6, because I think this will knock your socks off too. Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. And this is at the end of the Babylonian reign, right before Cyrus comes in from Persia and takes over Babylon. And Belshazzar's the king. Nebuchadnezzar's long gone. Daniel's still there, though. Belshazzar, while he tastes the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and the princes and his wives and their concubines might drink therein. In other words, all of the temple utensils that were taken when Nebuchadnezzar tore down the temple, he carried off all the treasures. They're going to use those to celebrate their orgy, during their orgy, and during this dinner and their false gods and whatever they're praising. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which were at Jerusalem. The king and his princes, his wives and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, of brass and iron and wood and stone. Wow, that kind of sounds like commerce, doesn't it? In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand. Now this is what's cool. During all this, all of a sudden, a hand appears in the air. Like this, with its fingers sticking out. And it's flying across the room. This will freak you out. It's just a hand. There's no elbow, there's no wrist, just a hand. The same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and he wrote against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed. I guess so. And his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed. We won't go into that. And his knees smote once again. You ever been so scared your knees rock? That's real. You can get so scared that your knees will hit each other. And that's what's happening here. And the part about his joints of his loins loose, I think we can imagine what it meant there. Yes. And the king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet. Remember, the woman, by the way, is dressed in scarlet, purple and scarlet, and have a chain of gold upon his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him. His lords were astonished. I think that's worse than astonished. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lord, came into the banquet house, and the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in the kingdom. Who do you think it is? Daniel. There is a man in the kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom King Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. Look at that, Daniel. We're going to drop down to 5:24 through 31. There's more, but I want to get to the point here. So in verse 24, then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. This is the writing that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. I never heard that before. Mene, mene. Doesn't sound like anything I ever listened to. Daniel says this is the interpretation of the thing. Mene. In other words, the word meaning, God has numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and are found wanting. Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. This is like the night before. While they were partying, Darius the Median, the Persians were already taking over the kingdom. What they had done... Remember, Euphrates went down through Iraq, and there was Babylon. The Euphrates River went right into Babylon. And so what they did is they shut the water down, and they were able just to walk right in there. They didn't have to go through the gates. It was strategy. Nobody ever expected anybody to dam up the river so they could get in. And so that's how he didn't even know what was going on. And Daniel tells him, God has numbered thy kingdom and finished it. You're weighed in the balances and are found wanting, and your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, put a chain of gold around his neck. They made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. And that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. They killed him. Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So 62 years old. But it had a secret message in it. And this is for us today. See, that was the immediate fulfillment, but it had a secret message. Now look at this. Mene was a coin which represented 50 shekels. So you had mene, that's 50 shekels and 50 shekels. A tekel was 1 shekel. So what do you have? 50 plus 50 plus 1. Right? 101. Then upharsin was 25 shekels. So that was a total of 126 shekels, right? And the scripture here in Ezekiel says a shekel shall be 20 gerahs. A gerah is also a coin, and it will be used in the millennial kingdom, according to Ezekiel. And he said 20 gerahs will equal 1 shekel. So you got 126 shekels times 20 for the number of gerahs. It comes out to 2,520 gerahs, right? Now, remember we talked about the 7 times? Anybody remember that 7 times? This is another scripture about the 7 times. See, it's 2,520. It's a sign. Many tekel upharsin. Now, let's see. We have a whole video, by the way, on just the 7 times. We talked about the mystery of the 7 times and what was meant by the prophetic 7 times. Now, you can go back. You can watch that whole video that we have out there. We never talked about this in particular, though. Remember the scripture, I have appointed thee each day for a year? But before they talked about days, and there was 2,520 days. But now we see that the gerah, he's always also talking about 2,520. What was he referring to? Nebuchadnezzar begins his reign in 605 BC, and the Babylonian captivity begins around 606 BC. 7 times equals 7 years. 1 year equals 360 days. 7 times 360 equals 2,520. That's what we had in many tekel upharsin. 2,520. 2,520 years are decreed. Cyrus the Persian takes the throne. In 538, Babylon is conquered. The Babylonian kingdom would be postponed to allow for 7 more times to pass over. Because what happened at the fall of Babylon, remember there was something that happened earlier with Nebuchadnezzar where he went crazy for 7 days. And then when he came back, this city, then his kingdom recovered. And that was also a prophecy. Well, here we say that when this happened, when the fall came to Babylon, the kingdom now of Babylon would be postponed to allow for this 7 more times, or 2,520 years to pass. So when we do the math, what happens? Cyrus the Persian was in 539 BC. The Babylonian kingdom was postponed for 2,520 years. You take the 2,520 minus the 539 and minus the year, because you're out AD and BC. You come up with 1980 AD. That's pretty close to where we live, right? Did anything happen of significance at that time? In 1979 AD, Saddam Hussein officially became the president of Iraq. And we asked the question, is Babylon being resurrected? Because all the stuff we talked about, Babylon's going to become central focus in the world. And he was rebuilding. In fact, he said over and over, I am Nebuchadnezzar reincarnated.
He was his great-great-grandson. He actually is.
And he was related. Saddam Hussein officially claimed to be the reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar. Remember this guy who had a lot of news about him during this time? Babylon, look at Babylon. He restored all this, and this actually is there in what was Babylon. Now, today, it's there. He restored all this. You see the walls with the lions on the walls. Saddam Hussein believed he was destined to rebuild the city of Babylon. Did he do it? He sure did give it a good start. There was also a judgment upon Israel regarding this 7 times more judgment. First, the judgment began with Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian captivity in 606 BC. Nebuchadnezzar became the king, the head of gold. You have 1 biblical year, which is 360 days. You got 1 prophetic day equals 1 year. 1 time equals 1 year, which is 360 years, a day for a year, right? So you got 360 years. You multiply the 7 times, you get, once again, 2,520 biblical years. If you take the 2,520 years and you subtract the 606 BZ, you come up with the year 1914. Was that significant? Ooh, World War I, 1914. The war, from God's perspective, was to free Israel from who? Turkey. In 1917, the end of World War I, it started in 1914, the land of Israel no longer was under the dominion of the beast kingdom, which was the Ottoman Empire, the Caliph, if you will, or the Caliphate, which was Turkey, which was over that. The head of the Caliphate, or the Ottoman Empire, was Turkey. And of course, you had World War I. It began 28th of July, 1914. It lasted until November 11th, 1918. To me, that is so significant because this shook the whole world. This shook the United States. This just shook us up. And do you know how much prophecy has gone out since this time? When this happened, when World War I happened, people began to pay attention and talk about the end times. Many people came to the Lord because of it. And Israel was freed because of it. We talked about this also. Remember, it all revolved. Remember, it's Rome. Rome. It continues to exist. It rose up. It was there in the days of Jesus. It became the Holy Roman Empire. It started there. You can see the First Reich. But then we talked about, then there was the Second Reich. Remember we talked about it? And then there was the Third Reich, which is Hitler. And there's going to be one more Reich to come, according to the Bible. We have the dragon there, because we don't know who it's going to be. But it's going to be the final European empire. Kind of like, if you want a title, it'd be like, The Empire Strikes Back. Then you have this very interesting prophecy in Psalm 83 where it talks about 10 horns or 10 kingdoms. Psalm 83 mentions 10 kingdoms. You can see it in the Psalm. Edom, the Ishmaelites, the Moab, the Hagarites, the Gebal, Ammon, Amalek, Philistia, Tyre, and Ashur. And here's the modern day territories. Edom was Jordan, southeast Israel. Ishmaelites were consisted of the Arabs, Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Kuwait, and Sudan. Moab was Jordan. The Hagarites was Jordan. Gebal was Jordan. Ammon was Jordan. Amalek was Jordan, Iraq, and Kuwait. Philistia was Gaza. Tyre was Lebanon, and Ashur was Syria, Iraq, southeast Turkey. You see a beast with 10 horns. What does all that mean? If you plot them out, here's the 10 horns from Psalm 83. Remember, the beast has 10 horns, right? Well, here's the 10 horns. What's right above it? Europe, right? Europe is the beast, and you can see the 10 horns underneath. One of the horns there, you see Turkey. Then you have the war of Gog and Magog. You have the countries that are represented there by name. You got Magog, which is Turkey. Meshech is Turkey. Tubal is Turkey. Persia is Iran. Cush is Sudan. Put is Libya. Gomer is Turkey. And Togarmah is Turkey and Armenia. And we showed a similar map to this here. You can see the nations that make up these nations that come against Israel in Ezekiel 38, 39. Here they are again. And you definitely saw this map before. It's just prettier. And so now, if you put it all together, here is the beast, the latter day empire, represented by that fourth beast. You have what used to be Rome, right? And now you've got all what God calls the 10 horns. He names the 10 horns in Psalm 83. And you also have the representations here of these last kingdoms. Remember in Revelation 13:2, he said the beast was a combination of the lion, which was from Babylon Empire, the bear, which was Medo-Persian, and the leopard, which was Greece. And if you add those three beasts together, all the geographical area with the 10 horns, and you've got the European common market, look what you got here. This is that final kingdom, the final empire. Now, again, I don't know that this is going to be one empire, or if what this represents is that this is what I think. This is the caliphate. What's in gray here is going to be the caliphate. And what's in yellow there is going to be the European Union. And they're going to be trading partners. They're going to be in and out, working together. They are going to become the largest and the greatest empire ever to have existed and known to man. And what do you have right down here? Right in the middle of it all, you have Iraq, which is going to be renamed Babylon. Here's where the city of Babylon would be. You're going to have the apparition, which is showing up here. You're going to have the Pope, the Vatican, move over here. The Pope's going to change his title. He will come out and say that Jesus was not the Son of God. He has to do it to appease all those Muslims. Remember, he's not now the president of the Catholic Church. He's now the president of all, or the prophet of all religions. And it just won't do to have the main prophet over all the religions. It just won't do for the rest of the religions for him to say Jesus was the Son of God. He's got to say that Jesus is no better than Muhammad, or they're not going to combine together. And so this is what you have in the last days. And this is when I say, so you're going to have the apparition, you're going to have, and you're going to have the United, remember we talked about the United Nations. So the United Nations is going to be located here. You're going to have this empire here. And right here, you're going to have the great city of wealth. They've already got all that oil, but there's going to be such a great city. And all of this commerce is going to open up. It's just going to be something like nobody's ever experienced before. Now, what happens to the United States in all this, I don't know. But the United States is not going to be the superpower of wealth that it was. And remember, the United States, by the way, is $20 trillion in debt. When this happened, when the new United Nations, when the New World Order hits, they're going to have a new economic system. And all that debt, it's either going to be erased, and they're going to say, we're going to start all over. They're going to erase the books. And that might be why your politicians don't care if we keep going in debt, because they're basically claiming bankruptcy. But the edge that may put them on top, they don't have that anymore. All the money is now, even the surrender of the internet, is all going to be going to Babylon, which is going to be more central to this empire. You all see it? And then you have the prophecy in Daniel. Remember the image? At the end of the image, he said this will last until the end. The final thing you're going to see is the feet and the toes. He says this. And remember, you have all the 300 million Muslims are now working in Europe, because that's where all the jobs are. Okay? It's like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch you. You're going to have this economic relationship. As the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay. Remember, iron was Rome. Clay is the Muslims. And so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. Whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves together with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. That's what you basically see today in Europe. You know, some people say 20% Muslim. Some say 15%. In some areas of Europe, they say it's as bad as 30%. It's really getting out of hand. But one thing they know for sure, this hand doesn't mix with this one. Christianity does not mix with Muslim or Islam. And that's the job of the Pope, to get them to mix together. Of course, he's not going to be able to do that, and that is going to fail. Over time, it's going to fail because we know that, remember the 10 horns attack the harlot, remember? They devour her. If you look at an ancient map, see, if you've studied prophecy for years, you've probably heard that the instigator is Russia. And you know how goofy it is? They take a word in the prophecy, which is in Hebrew, in English, it's chief. It says it's translated as the chief prince. In Hebrew, the word is Rosh. It has nothing to do with Russia. Russia doesn't come from that word, Rosh. It sounds like it in English. And they say, see, Rosh is the chief. So therefore it's Russia. But that's not true. If you look at ancient maps, you'll see that everyone listed Togarmah, Gomer, Meshech, Tubal, Magog. If you look in Noah's Ark, remember Noah's Ark is where? In Turkey, right? I believe God's there to show you where all these nations came. If you go back and look, all these nations were named at the time of Noah. They're all about Turkey, and ancient maps will show that. Remember I talked about what's called Turkestan. Turkestan is not a place, but it's a reference. What they've done is they've taken all of these nations that you see up here, and they group them together, and here's a Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, and you've got Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan or something like that. I don't even pronounce these very well, but I certainly don't live around there. But all of these are Turkish, Muslim, and they used to be part of the Soviet Union. And it might be that people years ago, when they were trying to put this together, see, it was all part of the Soviet Union. But now that it's split off, you can tell it's actually part of Turkey. All of this is going to be following the lead of Turkey at the time. So all of that we've seen in the previous maps, this is going to go with it too. Plus, the Bible talks about Antichrist being, it calls it the Assyrian. Did you notice that the Assyrian Empire was this? It was made up of Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Iran, and the rest. You can see it go back there. So that was the Assyrian Empire. And you can see how everything that the Bible talks about is all coming together. It's all coming together at once. And that would be the kingdom of Antichrist. But remember, it's not just, this is the Caliphate. And it also, the Caliphate's not only this, but it also comes down here, right? But then you've got Europe tied to the empire, so that the two of them are working. And, that's not so unbelievable, because remember when Constantine set up Rome, he moved his throne. He left Rome. He went to Constantinople, which was Turkey. He set up the east and the west part of the empire. It was one it worked like one empire. Eventually became two. But that may be the vision. Whoever comes up with this plan, that may be their vision based upon what Constantine did. But just like the Roman Empire, there was the East and the West. There's going to be the East and the West of these empires. I believe there'll be independent. Caliphate's not going to be. I don't believe that Turkey is actually going to become a part of them, and that the whole caliphate will be under the emperor. I believe that they're going to be independent, but they're working together. And it's just like the feet, the clay and the iron. See, if it says that the clay mixed with the iron and it all became iron, then that would make sense. Or if it says the iron mixed with clay and it all became clay. It doesn't say that. So the iron tried to mix with the clay and it could not mix. And it just kind of all mixed up. And that's what we have. But here's the caliphate. It was the Assyrian Empire. Oh, by the way, that Assyrian Empire, that's what ISIS wants to establish right now. That's their whole point. Also, here's something. Satan is coming home to Turkey. In March of 2006, the nation Turkey, after failing to convince Germany to return the altar, decided to rebuild a perfect replica of the ancient altar on the same ancient hill in Bergama. That's when a decision was made, the location of the ancient Pergamum. In March 2006, Turkish Culture and Tourism Minister Attila Cox stated that there is no chance of having the altar returned from Germany because we have no legal right, but now we have a new project to make exact copies, replicas of those historical artifacts, and they will be built on the original site. This certainly wonders if the same dark anti-Semitic spirit that seems to have followed this ancient satanic altar to Germany will now also become a welcome home in Turkey. In fact, there are many reasons to believe that this is already the case. There is an article out there right now that remember we showed the current president of Turkey. He's the one that says I think it's 2024. this will be available. This will be already built and open up for tourism. The altar of Satan will be back in Pergamus. Isn't that interesting how all this is happening together, and now they're going to reestablish, right? Not just the altar of Satan, but the altar just where it used to be, as well as all the rest of the pagan artifacts and temples. And they're going to put it all out there. Why would a Muslim build all those pagan temples? Because he must know, he must have the spirit of the devil. He must know that Allah is nothing more than the moon god. He must know that.
Isn't the menorah in 2024? Plants?
Yes, 2024 is that menorah. Was it? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything we've been talking about coincides. Everything coincides. Now, hopefully, we won't be here for this, right? Of course, that's the Antichrist kingdom.
It's not that far away.
It's not that far away. That's not that far. It's just another button on the cloth, if you will. It's another thing that we can look and say, wow, this is all happening in front of our eyes. Again, back to these 10 horns and the horn rising up, because we still have a prophecy for last days here with this in Daniel. It says, thus, Daniel 7:23 through 24, and Daniel 11:43, we're going to go to. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, shall devour the whole earth, shall tread it down, break it in pieces. When we put it all together, can you see how it's devouring the whole earth? And the 10 horns out of the kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, another shall rise after them. He shall be diverse from the first. He shall subdue 3 kings. Looking in Daniel 11:43. Speaking of the Antichrist, remember part of those horns, those 10 horns we saw in Psalm, were Egypt, Libya, and Ethiopia, or which we call it Sudan. Because remember, the word Ethiopia it was Cush in the Bible. But he shall have power, Antichrist shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians, they all shall be at his steps. Those are they basically, it sounds like they're not going to willingly cooperate, and so he's going to bring them down. And what will you have when you take 10, you take them away? You're going to have 7, just like before. So here we saw this before. We have the beast empire. And here you've got the 3 horns that are being taken down, according to Daniel 11, which we just read. And that is what's coming. And they sit right in the center of the world. And that's the Antichrist kingdom that's coming. This is not the United Nations. Of course, with the United Nations we talked about before. This is just this 4th beast.